In the music industry today, there's plenty of people who are kind of stuck in their old ways and would like to see music go back to an older time. Bobby Owsinski is not one of those people. He has been in the music industry for a long, long time. He's been an artist, he's been an instrumentalist, he's been a teacher, he's been a producer, he's been an author, he's been a journalist. He's kind of the whole package. He's seen where the music industry came from, has seen the entire change of where it is today. And because of all that experience, he has amazing practical insight into how you can be a better artist, how you can be a better songwriter, how you can be a better producer, and how you can better promote yourself in the industry today. He's got great predictions on where the industry is going that can really help you out. So I'd invite you to take a listen today. You can find his stuff at his website, bobbyowsinski.com, and check out his podcast, his books. They're all fantastic. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with him a few weeks ago.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into music, how you got to LA. You've been in for a long time, so why don't you just give us your background?
I grew up in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, actually Minersville, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Pottsville.
Sure.
If that's possible. And I was lucky to grow up in a time when there was a lot of clubs. You could play 7 nights a week, and I was doing it when I was a sophomore in high school. I was playing 4 nights a week, and it just grew from there. So I went through various bands. I think we did our first record when I was 16 or 17, a horrible thing that I hope no one ever listens to.
We all have that one.
Well, I have several, unfortunately. But I was playing with the most popular band in the territory at the time, called The Other Side. Mm-hmm. And The Other Side did break out of Minersville, believe it or not, to play up and down the East Coast, mm-hmm. and play at all the biggest clubs. The band got 2 deals. They had 1 deal before me with Bearsville, and then I got with them a little while later, and we had a deal with Polygram. Polygram is one of the 6 major labels at the time. Mm-hmm. Recorded a record that was pretty bad as well. Never captured what we were, but we didn't know how to write songs. So, I mean, that's the big thing. You don't know how to write songs. You don't do well. But I was disenchanted with the process while we were recording. We had a producer that he wasn't familiar with the type of music we're playing. But one of the good things happened was I started to get my engineering chops together because the record label let me record demos for other bands on their label. So then at the end of that, I kind of decided I have to make a change. I don't want to stay, because all of a sudden you go from making a record for a major label and then you're back playing clubs. You're doing the same thing.
Right.
And it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I want to get better. So I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston. And because I had engineering chops and a degree in electronics, they asked me to be a teacher my second semester there as a student. Wow. Which I can tell you does not work.
Yeah.
Sounds
complicated.
So I decided I'd rather be a teacher than a student, because one of the things about Berklee is you learn kind of what you need in the first year. After that, you specialize. Mm-hmm. And I don't really want to specialize in writing for big band. I was a composition major and, all that stuff, or orchestra. So I just decided to be a full-time teacher. And I did that for about a year, and then I walked into a teacher's lounge one day, and there was a guy that was just renting. And he said, "This place is for rookies or has-beens." And it hit me right between the eyes. I don't want to be either of those. So at the end of the week, I gave my notice. I was off, and I moved to Los Angeles.
Okay.
Didn't know any. 1980. I didn't know anybody. I have $500 in my pocket. I just did what everybody else does. I hustled, and I took every gig I could. I still wanted to be a musician more than an engineer, but I took engineering jobs. And eventually I got pretty good and started to tour. And I did one tour with a famous rock guitarist who shall remain nameless that was so bad that at the end I said, I'm done. I'm done being a musician. And I was about 40 at the time. So I was kind of burnt out in the whole thing anyway.
Sure.
So then I just went into the studio and it was more of the same. So then, you know, I was in the studio for a long time, working on a variety of projects. And then in the meantime, I was writing. This is actually pretty good. And the reason why I mention this is you never know how things are going to happen.
Sure.
So when I was touring, one of my best friends, who was a bass player, he came on the bus one day and he said, I just got a job writing for the music paper. The music paper was the #1 music rag in New York. That's what everybody read.
Okay.
And I thought, you know, if he could do that, I could too. And I called it Mix Magazine, and I offered my services, and I began to write. You know, I wrote for various magazines, you know, you name it, Hollywood Reporter, Billboard, Mix, EQ, tons of them. It started a second career for me. And then what happened was I was a good recording engineer, but I was a horrible mixer. I just wasn't good at it. But because I was writing all these articles and I was in the scene, I knew the best guys.
Sure.
So I went to him, I said, tell me how you're doing this, because I can't get my arms around it. And then I thought, you know, if I feel like that, I bet there's a lot of other people feel that way. So it led to my first book, which was the Mixing Engineer's Handbook, which is, oh, there you go. Yeah. And it's still a standard in colleges all over the world today. It still works, but it led into a career, a second career writing.
Absolutely, yeah.
The point of all this is you never know when something is going to pop up, a situation, a comment from somebody, that if you follow it, it's going to take you down another path, but it might be a better one.
Well, I have some questions kind of about the music business to start going into. Like, since you've been through it, you know, for a long time now, you've seen all the changes that are happening. What's changed in the music business in the last 20 years or so, 20 to 30 years?
There's a lot, but you know what? I think the bottom line is this. It's always been hard to make it in the music business. Okay. It's no different today than it's ever been. Well, in terms of that, it's different. Sure. There are different paths, but really, in terms of how hard you have to work and the breaks you have to get, pretty much the same.
Okay.
I have no nostalgia for the past, where a lot of people, you know, will complain that, you know, oh, things were better back then. As far as I'm concerned, you know, they're different, but it's not better or worse. It just was.
Why don't you talk about what's the difference of actually like the business of being an artist?
That's changed considerably. When I started, you needed to get a record deal. It was too expensive to actually do it on your own. You know, just going into a studio, there were no home studios. I mean, there were zero. They were all commercial. So you had to have, you know, some money in your pocket to be able to do that, and then take it the next steps, because there's several. You know, it was kind of impossible to do that. But the record deals were different in that the labels were owned by owner-operators. They weren't MBAs. They weren't suits. They were people who genuinely love music. And they would find an artist because they just thought highly of him and sign him. It didn't matter how long it took. They would stand by him until it broke out. And so many of what we call legacy artists today took till the third and the fourth and the fifth album even before things popped. And that would never happen today. What's way different is now the labels do not do development at all. So what they'll do is they'll wait for you to gain traction, and then they'll take it the rest of the way. Right. But you have to gain that traction yourself. Yeah. So there's a big element of do-it-yourself that wasn't there before, and all that's necessary. I mean, yeah, we all wanted to have hands-on before, but now it's necessary, or else, you know, you're going to be in your bedroom.
I find a lot of people are kind of stuck in that old mentality where they're like, well, I'm just going to shop around, you see who, I'm going to make a song and see if a record label's interested in me.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't work that way. You have to have traction
Mhm.
to be for a record label to be interested. And the traction is the scale of everything has changed.
Mhm.
This is what people don't understand. Back in the day, a million of something was huge. So if you sold a million anything, it was probably a physical product. So there was a big margin there. There was, real money to be made. And now in the digital age, a million is kind of sort of just getting in the game.
Mhm.
Record labels don't even, you get a million, it's like, yeah, so what? You get 10 million, their ears start to perk up a little bit. 50 million of views or streams, that's a minor hit. And then you got people really interested.
Mhm.
But that's 50 million. But the fact of the matter is, there has to be a good amount of traction, or else you're not going to get any consideration. Now, you might on a small label, but then again, you get a small label, they're not going to give you money. The only thing they'll do is help market your record or your release. And if they do give you any money, it's really small. It's a, drop in the bucket amount.
Right, right. I've heard some artists talk about nowadays getting a distribution deal. And is that different than the traditional record deal? What does that mean?
Yeah, it is. Back in the day, distribution deal meant that you pretty much took care of everything. You took care of all the production, it's mastered, and it could be what they call the P&D deal, which is pressing and distribution.
Okay.
So you handed them the master and they would press the product,
Right.
be it vinyl or CDs, and then distribute it. And then a straight distribution deal would have been you, the artist, have already printed up the CDs or whatever, and then they just took them and distributed them out, because you couldn't do it, unless you got in your car and drove all over the country and knew where every record store was. You couldn't do it.
Right, right.
I think there's 3,200 mom and pop record stores in the United States. It's down from 10,000. So there's fewer, but they are out there. But nonetheless, a distribution deal today means that they're going to get it out to the digital markets. You don't really need that. You can go to TuneCore, CD Baby, or DistroKid, or any of those.
Yeah.
If marketing is included, depending on what kind of marketing, that could be worthwhile.
Sure, absolutely.
Are they marketing you to playlist curators? That's worth it if they have connections there. Are they tight with music bloggers? Are they tight? Are they tight in the places that you aren't? Do they have those connections?
Yeah.
So you're paying for the connections at that point. Yeah, I mean, you're paying in via royalties, or the split in what's coming in.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? If you don't have those chops, sure it is. That being said, big record deals are out there. I have a friend of a friend whose daughter, and I was privy to seeing the contract. And it was $1 million contract. It was $1 million coming from a major. She had several that offered a contract in that neighborhood. It's not an artist that you've heard of yet. All the details are pretty amazing. She got to produce her own records. She got $15,000 for every cut that she did. So those deals are still out there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she had lots of traction beforehand. So that was the whole thing. She was already doing really well on Spotify, and people would be shocked with the royalties that she was making from Spotify. So when you hear all the tales of, they only pay this amount and not making any money, well, there are people that are. So that's the whole misconception of it. You get the stories of, I had 3 million streams, I only made $30. Yeah, but there's a lot behind that. You don't. First of all, what kind of royalty is it? Is it the publishing royalty? If it's a publishing royalty, are we talking about which part of it are we talking about? There's all sorts of different repercussions there. So and different variations.
Yeah.
So most of the time, artists or songwriters don't understand themselves. So, you get the false narrative that goes out
Right.
as a result.
Right. As far as traction goes, like, what are the things that they need to be focusing on? What are the things that it takes to actually get some traction, whether it leads to a record deal or not? What are the things that help you get noticed, help you gain a better audience, that kind of stuff?
Well, it's always audience.
Mhm.
So any kind of social traction that you have that has some real numbers, that's always impressive. I'm talking about real numbers, not purchase numbers, because
Oh,
everybody
yes.
gets to that now, so that doesn't
Sure.
quite work. The other thing is, not enough people realize that record labels never sign you for your music anymore. They
Mhm.
don't care about your music. They care about your audience or potential audience. So if you have a line around the block consistently of people waiting to get in to see you when you gig, believe me, labels are going to pick up on that. It doesn't matter where you're at in little town America, they're going to find out, and they're going to be there because that's important to them. Your audience is more important than your music, because they always figure we can make it better. We'll figure out how to make it more commercial or whatever. That's not the problem. We'll figure out how to market you. But if you have that intangible to get the audience, that's the most important thing. So anyway, that's number one, to have the audience. How do you get it? Well, your music has to be really good, but then the whole thing is, how do you find that audience that likes your music, right? I don't believe there's bad music. I mean, there's music that you don't like or you don't appreciate, but there's an audience for everything.
Mhm.
You just have to find it.
Right.
And I've always found that the best way to do that is, you're going to have some fans eventually, and they always tell you who your audience is. They'll say, you sound so much like so-and-so.
Sure. Okay.
And most artists can't get this.
They can't stand that.
They'll go, I don't think I sound anything like that. But it doesn't matter, because that's where your audience is. So you have to go to them. You have to find where they live and then get your music to them.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because if one person thinks that, there might be other people. And especially if you have multiple people in your audience saying, you sound like this, whatever, then you go, wow, okay, well, then I should understand that and try to cultivate it.
And that could be all on social. That could probably be some of the old fashioned ways where you're hanging up signs around town.
Yep.
It could be a lot of things. Sure.
All of the acts that popped up in the 90s and early 2000s started the old fashioned way for the most part. And that was cultivating audiences. And that was, and I know from the ones that were out here, I witnessed a lot of them that started from nothing and became huge. The Motley Crues, for instance, Missing Persons, and any of those acts, I saw them become really big, starting playing in clubs down the street, and it all had to do with getting as much exposure as you can, playing as much as you can, and they were really, really big into postering everywhere, doing whatever you can to really make sure your audience would show up when they did play, because that's still the key. People show up, you get gigs. I mean, and there is a method to that most people don't follow. And if we just, take a step back, one of the biggest things that people don't do is get a mailing list. They think, oh, yeah, it's old-fashioned and nobody reads email, but they do. And it's the most powerful thing that you have in your arsenal. To get those emails are really important, because you can reach out to people in a personal way. And just to keep up with them. And I always say, you keep up with people by telling them what you did, what you just did, what you're doing now, and what you're about to do.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So there's always news there that you could share. But there's a gigging strategy as well. So what will happen is, most artists, they'll have an email list, and they'll email out to their fans, say, oh, we have a gig coming up next Thursday, or this Thursday, whatever. And that's it. They don't do anything after that. But there's a whole sequence that you need in order to make that work. So basically, what I've found works there is to say, the day you book the gig, you send something out. Doesn't matter if it's 2 months in advance, 3 months. You send it out, say, hey, just be aware, we're going to be playing at this place. Week before you send one out, an email. Guess what? We're playing next week, blah, blah, blah. 3 days before, 2 days before, the day of, or a day before and the day of, you make sure you email. And to some people, you'd say, some people think that's way too many. They're going to be pissed at me. But the fact of the matter is, if they're real fans, there's going to be people that go, oh, I forgot about this.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
they're going to show up.
Or
and
or they deleted the other ones and didn't see it.
And if they off your list, then they're not fans anyway. You weren't never going to get them. So no big deal.
Sure.
And then post after, the day after you post, and you post pictures from the gig.
Mm-hmm.
This was cool. This is what happened, blah, blah, blah. There's a new song, whatever. And that way people that didn't make it feel like, oh, I wish I would have been there. I'll go the next time.
I've heard some people kind of give the same sort of strategy for releasing your music as well.
Yeah.
Right?
The album isn't dead, but it's more or less dead. You don't need an album. You need a lot of songs. Mm-hmm. And you release them frequently. So the ideal would be once a month, once every 6 weeks, something like that. The reason why it's better than an album is you know what it's like. You get an album and you flip through it, and a little bit on each song. Oh, I really like that one. I really like that one. And there's 1 or 2 songs that you play all the time, and you kind of forget about the other ones.
Sure. Yeah.
By releasing every one, just singles, 2 things happen. The first is you can promote it. So you can promote every single release rather than an album, which is just one release and a single. Right. So there's more exposure. There's more frequent exposure. You won't get attrition from your fans as a result, and your real fans, and they have more time with each song to discover it.
Sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of really good reasons to do that, mm-hmm. and there are artists that are very successful that that's all they do. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, you just compile them. You have a compilation. That's your album.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of people that feel like they like albums, so that's what we should keep putting out because that's what I want to do. But then they forget what's happening today, and especially I always say it's about being top of mind. Like how many commercials you see on the Super Bowl over and over and over again because they want to be there when you think about them.
Yeah. So
it's the kind of thing where you get lost on a playlist and people forget about you, and if you keep coming up, it helps you get remembered.
Yep,
sure.
That's it.
Are there any other pitfalls that you've seen artists make when they're trying to get audience or release their music?
I think a big thing is being too personal on social. Okay. You have to treat it professionally. There's a time and place. You might want to have a separate social account that it's only for your friends that you don't tell anybody about. Generally, social is professional. You have to be professional and stay professional because it's too easy to alienate people if you're not.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you can get political or religious or something like that, and without even realizing it, and next thing you know, there's some fans that go away as a result.
Sure.
The other thing that could happen is you can get too trivial. So if you talk about what you had for breakfast this morning, most people, unless you're Beyonce or
nobody
whatever,
cares.
Nobody cares. And even then, doesn't matter. So, that's the whole thing. You keep it trivial and you just keep it down to the same old thing. What you worked on, what you're working on now, what you're about to work on. And there's always all sorts of variations on that with people that you met along the way or where you worked or, there's tons of different things to talk about that aren't too personal.
Yeah. If you're keeping consistent then with trying to keep consistent with doing posting things on social media, is there a too much? Is there a too little?
Yeah, there is actually. There's ideal counts for every social platform. Most of it is far less than you'd think. Mm-hmm. Once a day, for instance, on most of them, even on Instagram, where some people will just do tons all day. On Twitter you can get by with more. Now There's exceptions. The exceptions being if you're at an event, a gig being an event, you might want to post more on that, but the whole trick is to space it out.
Sure.
So all of a sudden there isn't a dozen posts right on top of one another, because people hate when their feeds are all taken up by one person.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to do that, you just warn everybody, hey, there's a lot coming here. So just understand.
Yep.
But you can do too much. You can also do too little, where consistency is really important on social.
Sure. As far as looking at the scene in general, are there social media platforms that you would say that people should focus on? Because it's got to be really hard to do everything and do it well.
Yeah, the third edition of my social media promotion book just came out. Social media promotion for musicians, a couple of weeks ago. So it's a good time to talk about this, because I've been focusing on it a lot.
Sure, sure.
I've been thinking about it. Instagram for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If I had it to do over again, I'd put more energy into Instagram than anything else.
And why is that?
There are more music lovers there.
Okay.
It's been proven. Most of the users really love music as compared to other platforms. And it's not that they're not on the other platforms. It's just more of them there, and they take more action, and they either subscribe or they buy or whatever. So there's a great audience there. So there's good and bad with each one, but it depends on your audience. If your audience is younger, it's Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
If it's older, then it's probably Facebook.
Yes, I agree. Just with even promoting myself, I've found that to be true. The older people in my scene are mostly on Facebook. And if I want to reach to the younger audience, it's more Instagram or other stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's really only 4 big ones when it comes down to it. I mean, you have Facebook, Instagram, sort of Twitter, although that's plateaued, and of course, YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can put Snapchat in there, and a few others that aren't quite the same thing. But when it comes down, and Twitter, that was hot for half a second.
Yeah, sure.
And right now, what it is, it's good for people that are journalists or are breaking news. It's especially good for that, sportscasters and stuff like that. Really good for finding out news. It's not really good for that much else, although you can have a big Twitter following and make it work for you.
Well, I guess it's, like Instagram is because it was based on photographs first, it's probably a lot more art focused, and it's, Twitter is text based, and where does music fit into that? Unless you're just quoting songs or something.
Yeah. No, you're right.
People are talking a lot about TikTok now. What's that doing? Is that doing something for music at all?
Yeah, I should have actually put that in there, but it's different. It's a different animal.
Sure.
TikTok has been responsible for what, 4 or 5 big hits in the last couple of years.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah. The Lizzo song, Lil Nas X, there's another big one. The Weeknd, that's 3. There's another real big one that's kind of skipped my mind, but they kind of all started. Tones and I, that one, that was really big. They start as memes,
right.
But there's downsides. The downside is, do you have something that's meme worthy? You look at your music differently. You look at it as part of picture rather than part of audio.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
In a way. Yeah. And then it's, you don't really get paid. You get paid. This may change soon, but almost every other service, somebody streams your music, views your music, you get paid something for that, for each one.
Right.
Complicated, convoluted, how it all goes together, but that's essentially it. When it comes to TikTok, the major labels got a one-time licensing fee. That's it. So some of that, and Merlin too. So, if you're part of the Merlin network. So what that means is you're going to get, one fee a year, one royalty a year for TikTok.
Okay. Gotcha.
Now that may change, but so your only hope is, can I put something out there that's a meme that's going to take off?
Yeah, right.
But it's powerful. It really does work, and they've rocketed up in a flash to over 1 billion users.
Do you see things changing with streaming? It becoming better for musicians in any way, or is it kind of just going to stay the way it is, and be what it is for a while?
Well, there's a number of things to consider here. The first is, there's that $9.99 price point if you're going to subscribe, and that's kind of dictated by the major labels. So even if a service wants to go lower than that, they can't. Now, Amazon kind of got around it, but again, convoluted way.
Okay.
And the prediction always has been, we're going to get a lot more subscribers if the price is lower. Now, it's kind of twisted in a way, because it's like, well, wait a second. Most streaming networks are not making money. Now, it doesn't matter to Apple, doesn't matter to Amazon. It doesn't matter to Google with, Google Play and YouTube, but it certainly does matter to everybody else. And if you can't turn a profit, how long is that going to last?
Okay.
So they want to raise their prices. And the problem is the product is the same.
Right.
It doesn't matter which service you go to. You're buying the user interface more than anything, because you're getting the same songs.
Right. Right.
So if one service is suddenly more expensive, you go to another service. So that's kind of it. That's keeping everything at the status quo. And there's only so much money that you can pull out of that, because otherwise there's going to be no money at all, and all of them are going to go under, except for Amazon, Apple, and YouTube Music.
Right. And it's not even, there's only so much money you can give to the artist then too. It's not even like the early days of iTunes, where you were still getting paid at least $10 an album, and a good chunk of that went to you. So
again, another thing that people don't understand is the way the payouts work. You read all the statistics, and they're very, very dangerous.
Okay.
And what the royalty rates are, because there's never enough information to really tell you exactly what's happening and where it's coming from. And most of the time, all the time, the royalty rates are averages, because the way it really works is it's all based on market share. The more streams you have, the higher you're getting paid for each stream. Most people don't understand that. So Beyonce's making more money and Ed Sheeran, they're making more money than, a small indie artist per stream. So yeah, I mean, you can say, and you'll see in your royalty statement, you're saying, oh, I'm only getting 0.005, and I see the average is 0.007. What is that? Well, it's the average, and they're probably making more. So the stars. So it's convoluted how it's working. But that being said, the big artists are making huge amounts of money from it.
When it comes to like an artist in a smaller scene, would you suggest that they chase streams? Should they be chasing their audience more? Should they be trying to sell physical product or merch? Where is the place where they could actually be making some money?
As someone smarter than I said, making a living is the new success. That's all of the above. Merch all depends on your graphics. If you have great graphics, you'll sell a lot of merch. Music, of course, is you have to find the audience. Everything else is, how good are you at social? And if you're not good, can you find somebody that will help you?
Right. Sure. And a lot of people want to try to do it themselves.
Yeah, and the downside is, just because you're on and you use a particular platform, it doesn't mean you know how to use it to promote music. It just means you know how to use it to consume. You're not, and in this case, we're not consuming. Right. We're producing. producing stuff out that we're promoting. So it's a different mindset and how all that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the big one, the music itself. So you've been a producer, you've been an engineer for a long time, you've been an artist. Well, let's say this, like, what is it that you see in an artist when you decide to produce them or work with them? What makes it something that you would want to work on?
Well, I'm to the point now where I don't have to take a gig for the money, thankfully, because I have lots of income streams. So I'll do it mostly because, boy, I really love the music. I fell in love with the music. But second of all, I like the people. People are fun.
Sure.
I can tell you this with absolute certainty because I've gone through it too many times. It's no fun to be locked up with people that you don't like for any time. It really isn't. It's torture.
Sure.
So why do that to yourself? If you need to make money, I can understand it, but you try to avoid that as much as possible. So it has to be a bunch of people that are fun.
Mm-hmm.
If it's fun, it reflects in the music.
What would you say are the key things that make a song good? And you could take that either way. You could take that, does it make it listenable, or does that successful? I don't, or both.
Well, there's been studies on this, believe it or not, on why songs are successful. And there is a formula. It's mostly based on melody.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an interesting melody, you're many steps ahead. So that's one thing. And one of the downsides of a lot of music today is the melody is restricted to say, there may be a melody, but it's kind of like a nursery rhyme. It's short phrase
mm-hmm.
that kind of repeats over and over and over. Where, you listen to really well-crafted songs, the melody goes a lot of different places throughout the whole song. So, and I think that's coming back, by the way. Better melodies in songs, I have to say. The second thing would be the arrangement of the song.
Mm-hmm.
That's key, and it's something that people don't understand, especially when you're starting, how important that is. And the arrangement includes development during the song. So, first of all, there's a clear delineation between sections.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Whereas the verse, whereas the chorus, is there a B section, is there an intro, is there an outro, is there a bridge? There's a clear delineation. And there's always something happening that's different from the section before.
Sure.
I mean, it's been like this since the 50s.
Yeah.
You can pick up any song today, virtually any song that's any pop song, R&B song, hip hop song, doesn't matter. They all basically have the same formula. There's always something different that's happening. So it's development.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, producers get paid for that when it's all said and done. Producers that are good at that are the ones that make hits.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, those are the things that kind of differentiate hits from non-hits.
As far as like songwriting goes, what are some of the things that you see people, I don't know, like do wrong, or what, in actually putting like the beginning of the song together? Yeah.
So, no, there's a lot. Big one is one of the things I just talked about. The song rolls and rolls and rolls along, and you can't tell where one section starts and when,
mm-hmm.
When stops. So there's no difference between the chorus and the verse, for instance.
Right.
That happens a lot. You have sections that go on and on and on and on. They're too long, where they could have been edited and been very succinct and done the same thing, same job.
Right.
There's no peak in the song. That's a third thing. Now, the peak could be either a high or low. So sometimes what we have now, instead of a bridge, which is the peak of the song, there's a breakdown that will happen.
Okay.
But it's basically acts as the same thing.
Sure.
So, those are just a few things. There's a lot more.
Sure. What would you say to someone who is, because we have a lot of people that are kind of producing their own stuff, just basic advice for getting into producing yourself and, what it takes to make something that's interesting?
Well, I think what you have to do is give yourself a a deadline.
Hmm.
And at this point, it's going to be, no matter what, it's going out the door. And the reason why is it's very easy to just go on and on the song and never finish.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably know artists like this that they've been working on the same album or the same whatever for years, and they just
Sure.
can't finish it. So you have to give yourself a deadline. And it's like, well, it is what it is at this point. It's going out. I think that's the biggest thing. The second thing is, if you're unsure of something, get an outside opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's important. Sometimes you can't see the forest from the trees because you're too close to it.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
And there's the third thing. I've run into this a lot. There's one artist in particular that I worked with a lot earlier in my career who was great. And he had all sorts of great ideas, too many great ideas. So what would happen is we'd finish the song and he'd go, I think this would sound better as a reggae version. And we'd go and we cut it again as reggae. And then we'd finish up. He'd say, yeah, maybe it's pop. and we cut the same song 4 different times and then go back to the first one anyway. Right. So, you kind of have to be able to self-police yourself on that.
Well, that kind of goes into my next question. Like, tell me how important pre-production is and why they should do it.
Less so today than it used to be. I mean, if you have a bunch of musicians that are going to be playing in the same room together, mm-hmm. which is the way it used to be done, sure. Then it's really important. And it's especially important to work out the arrangements at that point. I did an album last year, and we spent about 3 months. Not every day, but we spent, about 3 months, and it was just working on the arrangements and get everything tight and whatever, and listening to bass and drums to make sure they're together, and all those little things. So there's that. But today, a lot of this, when you have songs that are basically electronic in nature, you're writing it and producing it as you're going along. So there's no such thing as pre-production. It's someone comes in with an idea and then you work on it and it's a song.
Sure. Okay.
So different mindsets.
Sure. Is there anything that you do specifically before you lay down a note, though? Like, if you're going to produce someone, are there specific things you look at in order to make sure the song's ready to go record it? Even if it's more electronic.
I like to have a recording of it, a demo or something. Mm-hmm. And even if there isn't any, I like to make one, just something really fast. Okay, play it once so I can hear it and live with it for a while. That's really important, because if you're in a rehearsal room with somebody, you can't necessarily hear everything mm-hmm. clearly and distinctly. So it's easier later to be able to pick things out, say, again, bass and drums, they're just not fitting together, or this guitar part doesn't fit with this keyboard or vocal part or whatever. So that's important. Mm-hmm. At that point.
Aside from the opportunity to just keep things going on and on and on and on, working with computers now, what are the benefits of being able to work on it a little bit at a time?
Oh, sanity.
Or pitfalls. I don't know. Maybe it's a bad thing for some people.
Sanity. God, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I have sort of ADD. I think everybody in the business has their own case of it. But I get antsy after a while, and I kind of want to do something else. Now it's brilliant to be able to do that, especially if you're mixing. You mix one song for a couple hours and then say, I think I'll work on something else. And then you come back with it, and it's a round robin thing. Right. The problem is it will take a lot longer. And back in the day when we were doing it on consoles, you figured it was a day and a half for every mix. Mm-hmm. And the first day was you worked on it and you got it all tweaked. And then you came back the next morning and listened and tweaked it again, and then it was done. And at noon, then you started on your next song.
Yeah.
And that, so it was done. And now that's not the case. It will keep on rolling and rolling and rolling.
Yeah. I can't imagine, like, I don't know how I would have fared working 12 hours a day recording people in the studio.
It wasn't fun. It really wasn't. And there was such burnout that would happen, and you were burnt out and didn't even understand you were. That was the problem. So, you'd be dead tired and go back, and then the project would finish and you go right back on another one. And,
Right.
when I look back on it, I think that's a pretty crazy way to live.
Not only is it, and it doesn't hurt you, it probably hurt the music in some ways too.
Yeah, it does, because, after maybe 8 hours, like most things, it doesn't get better for the most part, unless you're under a deadline. If you're under a deadline, it's actually kind of fun, because it's like, we have to get this done by 3:00 on Thursday. So, let's go, and in that case, it's a different mindset.
I think we got to pretty much everything. Do you have any other big predictions coming up, like as far as what's going to happen with the industry or anything like that, I don't know, that artists themselves should look out for?
COVID's changing everything. Be interesting to see what happens in a post-COVID world. Certainly studios are going to change, because the maintenance is going to be higher. You'll have to disinfect a lot. We'll probably have fewer people in the studio at any one time, working. So that's going to be different. Already we're seeing patterns, different listening patterns. And it will be interesting to see how that actually works. Streams have gone down. I just saw where Sirius had a big downturn in their subscribers. The reason why is people aren't driving.
Oh, sure. Okay, that makes sense.
So listening patterns have really changed. As a result, there's an uptick in people watching as opposed to listening.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's really changed, and I don't expect that will carry on, but I think it will. It might take a while to come back to what we're predicting, and that's going to change things in the long run. That's going to change everything from record labels doing negotiations with streaming services on the next license. There's all these ramifications that, from this one thing that happened.
Yeah.
The self-isolation, people are used to working by themselves. There'll be more collaboration like this via Zoom or whatever. Because it actually works okay.
Yeah.
But it's comfortable. I mean, we can sit here and write a song together,
Well, sure. Yeah.
It'll be okay. So that's going to change things a lot, and that's for the worse, for sure, because, boy, there's nothing like having musicians in a room together.
And I totally agree. Yeah, I like working one-on-one with people, for sure. Yeah. And recently I've done a couple things. Like I dropped off a microphone to one of the clients I was in the middle of a song with, and she took it home and she's recording herself in Logic while I'm just listening on FaceTime and trying to produce her a little bit.
Yeah. There you go.
I mean, it works, but it's not the same. And
no.
Don't have as much control as if you're in the studio.
But that might bring some new technology that might make it different. I have no idea what that is, but I'm just thinking, usually when there's something that there's an obstacle in the way, that means that someone will figure out a way around it.
Right. And hopefully that's the case for a lot of stuff right now, that's getting pushed. So why don't you tell everybody who might be listening to this where they can find you and all the stuff that you do?
Well, it's kind of easy. Just go to BobbyOwsinski.com. BobbyOwsinski.com, and there are links to my blogs and podcasts and everything else there, my courses, all that stuff, books, so that's the reason why you should have a website, and it works for me.
Absolutely. Cool. Anything else you want to add?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me, Bobby.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Cool.